Okay, we're just doing a little demo on how to install the filter. So the filter should come from, the water will come from the bottom of the reservoir through the filter. Look at the direction arrow on the filter, and then after it goes through the filter, it then gets sucked into the intake of the pump. So on the one end of the filter that we supply, we have a 1/2 inch coupler and then a reducer down to a 3/8 hose barb, and on this side we're just going to use a 3/8 piece of pipe and run it directly to the pump. Okay, halfway through the install, we have our custom bubbler mounted, our reservoir refill mounted, our refill pump mounted, controller mounted, cell is mounted on the top. So we'll get everything mounted. And we'll put the large 200 amp relay in the back so we don't see it. We're just trying to have a nice display when we open it up to show people. There's our pump attachment coming out. And after we come back, we'll be hooking up the wires. So as you can see at the top, we have a valve. This tube goes to the air intake of the engine. Over here is another tube. You can shut this one off from the engine and run it out, so you can fill up bottles of soapy water to make explosions just for fun. And then on the top there, this one runs right through a rod down 2/3 into the water. The bubble goes up, the water goes down, the water goes out, and the gas goes up. So that is a mixture of gas and water coming into the bubbler from the negative terminal of the cell. You cannot mix the polarity of the cell or it will not work and you will create huge problems. So be very careful to make sure that the exit of the cell is connected to the negative to the battery, and where the water goes into the cell is connected to the positive. And we'll be back to show you the wiring. Okay, this is the fill pump relay. So inside the bubbler we have a float switch. When the float is up, it's off. When it's down, the water level is low and it's on. So we don't want the full power to the pump running through that little float switch. There's too many amps. So looking at our relay here, what we have is power from the battery that will go to the pump when the relay is on. The relay turns on when the power from this side is able to jump through the relay and ground out through the pump switch. So you must run the negative of the relay to the pump switch, not the positive. You cannot run current into the bubbler because it is a negatively charged component of the setup. Okay, I'm going to watch. So hooking up the controller now, we have another positive cable. Positive goes from the positive terminal on the battery to one of the large lugs on the contactor, or the extra large 200 amp relay. When the ignition switch turns it on, it then allows current to pass to the B plus terminal on the controller. And then on the other side of the bolt of B plus, power then goes over to the positive end of the cell. The blue box. Okay, we've just hooked up the large cables from the controller. This is the controller we're looking at here. And, bright, but basically what you have is on the bottom is the B minus, which is fused, and that one runs straight to the negative terminal of the battery. In the middle, that's the pulse. It's labeled M. It goes up and over and just hose clamps on to the negative end of the cell. Okay, and then on the top there, the red wires, is the B plus. So one of those cables is running over here to one side of the 200 amp relay, or the contactor we call it. The other side of the relay is running to the power source from the battery. So when the ignition switch turns this relay on, then it gets the full current over to the controller. Okay, and next, okay, cannot forget this little white jumper cable is connected to prong number 1 is the power supply to the controller. This is a little jumper looped over to the B plus terminal. Okay, there we got our refill pump, our reservoir, or I should say the water supply, which automatically fills this reservoir bubbler, or as we like to call it, the gas stabilizer, because this is not classic HHO, this is stabilized HHO, which is different. Okay, and next we'll be showing you how to wire the pumps and the switches. Okay, I'm just going to take a second here to explain it here where it's all laid out on the board so you can see everything. Okay, so here's our cell and our controller. This is the bubbler, gas stabilizer, water filter, circulation pump. That's a refill pump. The refill pump has a check valve so that it can only inject water into the system, but the pressure within the system will not push the water back up into the refill tank. Okay, on the side here there's a little float switch that sets an indicator light on the dash to tell you that you're out of water. Do not ever run your cell without water. You'll melt everything. Okay, so essentially what's happening here is here's our controller, just like we explained before. This is B plus on the top right as you're looking at the end of it. Okay, the power supply to the controller comes from the relay. It only gets power when the relay is switched on from the ignition. Okay, and the other side of the relay is connected to the power source on the battery. Power goes into the unit. Okay, says it's custom program, making its 14.7 kilohertz pulse and feedback signal to the cell. Down here on the bottom left you have the B minus. B minus runs directly to the negative terminal of the battery. And you have M for motor, which is running the pulse signal to the negative end of the cell. You must never hook these up reverse. Your cell will not work and you can actually damage it. Okay? B plus sends positive end of the cell. How can you tell the difference? If your Sharpie lines come off that we send the cell with, look very carefully here. At the end of the cell, you're going to see a little red silicone seal. When you see silicone on one end, that is the negative. On the other end, you will not see silicone. That is the positive. In case the little markers that we put on there somehow get wiped off, that's the only way that you can tell which end is negative and positive. You must be sure before you hook this up. If you hook them up reverse, you're going to have all kinds of problems. Alright? So, the circulation pump turns on and should be only on when the relay is on. All your systems should shut off with your ignition switch. The circulation pump will pull the water out of the bottom of the bubbler up through the filter into the pump and pressurize it into the positive end of the cell. It circulates through the cell, creates a plasma. Plasma and water are ejected out of the negative end. So you have plasma and water running up. They're coming into the long end in the top of the bubbler. There's actually a tube running down in here that is ejecting water and bubbles into the bubbler. Thankfully, God has it set up that bubbles go up and water goes down. The water goes back through the circulation to be reused, and the gas rises to the top and comes out of the exit to your application, to whatever engine that you're applying this to. Okay. There's your water supply of distilled water only. We have a relay hooked up to the fill pump. There's a float switch in here. When the water level's where we want it, it shuts the pump off. If the water level drops, then it turns on the pump. The pump will then push it through the check valve into the system, but this builds up the pressure. You can run it anywhere from 5 to 15 psi, and you can't have that pushing back into your water container. Okay, we'll be back a second to show you how we hook up the switches to the pumps.